right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So we heard a lot of interesting discussion this morning about building your culture of security, and so we're going to assume that you've done that you've modeled your threats, you've figured out what's most important to you, and you've now been informed about the wealth of free security tools and information that are available to you from OWASP and other sources to help to get you where you need to be. And then, the first question we had from our audience, and the first question that I would have is, well, where do you start? It's great to know that there are all these resources out there, but how do you possibly prioritize this and customize it into something that's really usable and useful to your organization, and something that you can sell to your management about why you need a budget for it? And then a theme that's sort of been underlying the whole discussion, and that I think is always there for security, and maybe less and less as security gets more and more high profile, but something that's kind of always there is, how do I get my peers to listen to me? So put aside getting the budget from management, how do I get the people in my organization to include me and to come and talk to me? I can be the chief grand poobah security czar of everything, and if my door is closed and no one speaks to me, I don't have a very good job. So
you have a pretty cool hat though, right?
Yeah,
blue fur.
Blue fur hat, nice.
So we have some experts here who have plenty of experience to inform a discussion on this topic. I'd like to get started by introducing them. I'm Laura Berger, and I'm going to moderate our panel today. I'm with the Privacy Division at the FTC, along with the other moderators today. And immediately to my left is Matt Johansen, who has graciously agreed to go by Matt J today. And he is
as I've graciously agreed my whole life.
Yeah, exactly. Although he left his Grand Poobah hat at home.
Yeah,
he is the Director of Security at Honest Dollar, an Austin financial startup. And before that, previously, he had a lot of experience at White Hat Security. He directed their threat modeling program and oversaw a lot of the testing of, I think, at one point, over 35,000 websites.
That's all.
Yeah, that's all. So he's aware of like the wide scope of vulnerabilities that can affect an application, but now newly aware of the pressures at a startup to bring all that information to bear in a meaningful way. And then to Matt J's left, we have Matt Tesauro, who is a senior software security engineer at Pearson, and before was a senior product security engineer at Rackspace, and he's also an adjunct professor here at University of Texas in the computer science department. I think he wants to take attendance if any of his students are still here at some point.
But he going for brownie points.
They're watching the webcast.
Yeah.
They're watching it live on the webcast, I'm sure.
I'm sure they're on the straight.
Yeah.
Sure
They'll be chiming in with questions for you.
Certainly.
And he is a former board member of the OWASP Foundation and a project lead for OWASP AppSec Pipeline and Web Testing Environment project. And then to Matt's left is James Wickett, who is, I love this title, Engineer of Awesome at Signal Sciences.
I just made that up myself.
Yeah, that's great when you get to invent your own title. That's great. Does it come with a hat is the question on everyone's mind now.
Yeah, quite an awesome hat.
Yeah, okay, all right. So more on that in the Q&A session. James founded an open source project, Gauntlet, to serve as a rugged testing framework. He is the author of Hands-on Gauntlet, Security Testing for Developers. And he also created and founded LASCON, the Lone Star Application Security Conference, the largest annual security conference here in Austin. And yet here all these people are talking to you for free today. What a bargain, right? And he got his start in technology when he founded a web startup as a college student. So we're hoping that together these experts can help you figure out exactly where to get started with your security testing. So we're gonna, if you are in the enviable position of being a startup that is growing at a really rapid clip, and you are, as the previous panel contemplated, launching code multiple times a day or even hourly, there are a wealth of possible things that can go wrong. Not to be a downer, but there are. So I think these first few slides are aimed at pointing some of those out for you. And Matt-Jay, maybe you can start us off.
Sure. So I like to throw these slides up early in a few presentations. If you guys have seen me talk, you might have seen some of these slides before. So this one comes from my last job at White Hat Security. We would put out a statistics report every year of the 35,000 websites that we tested and kind of the vulnerability landscape amongst all of them. And so how to read this chart is this is the percentage of those vulnerabilities that we tested that had at least one of the vulnerabilities down the left-hand side, okay? So 49%, I think it says up there, average about half across that top row, broken down by language, of the 35,000 websites that we tested had at least one cross-site scripting vulnerability. Most of them had multiple, but as Josh said in the last panel, this stuff is everywhere. We've known about it for, I always ask Robert, what's the count now? How many years have we known about cross-site scripting? Since 2001, we've known about cross-site scripting, and right about when we knew about it, we knew how to fix it, and still, it's on absolutely every website. Half of all the websites that we looked at, right? And yeah, just vulnerabilities are absolutely everywhere. If we want to go to the next one, they get fixed really slowly. So not only do vulnerabilities exist very prevalently, these are critical vulnerabilities that could cause data loss on your websites. They get fixed incredibly slowly, and I usually like to leave the scale of what the numbers on this slide are just to kind of let the numbers stew for a second, and you can come up with your own scale and then tell you. Because one of the times, how many of you are familiar with Etsy.com? A bunch of you are. So Etsy is one of the pioneers of continuous integration, and they have this really big team, push code, 30 times a day or something like that. I don't know what their last count is, but pretty much everyone can push code. And one of the first times I pulled this slide up, one of the heads of security at Etsy was sitting next to me, and he was kind of nodding along, saying, okay, yeah, that looks about right. And then I said, this is actually the average number of time to fix in days. And he nearly spit out the coffee because he thought this was in hours, and he thought that looked about right, and this is actually in days. So we're at about a 200 day. If you take all the data here, it's like 193 days on average from the time a company is informed of a vulnerability to the time that vulnerability is closed, okay? That's incredibly slow. When it can take seconds to scan the internet and find this kind of stuff. If you're using a vulnerable version of something, you can find it on Shodan very, very quickly.
Let's just stop for a second, because
Sure.
I think people have had a difficult time. So say you have an app and you're like, well, we offer some functionality to users, but we're not really collecting any data. We just offer some functionality. And so if our application has a vulnerability in it, that's no problem. But explain exactly what Shodan is and how it makes it easy to exploit a vulnerability.
So Shodan is basically a search engine just collecting just all sorts of metadata on the internet that you can search by. So you can search by version number of things running PHP whatever, right? And okay, I know that version of PHP has a critical vulnerability in it. I can go on Shodan and say, hey, give me everything on the internet running that version of PHP, right? And Shodan will spit it out, just like Google would spit out, hey, give me the word PHP. Shodan goes a different level. You could do things like by geolocation. You could do things by device type. There's a layer of granularity there.
Yeah, and I think to note, it's not, if you're not familiar with Shodan, it doesn't stop at just like DNS entries, right? It just crawls like raw internet
right, yeah.
IP space. So.
And how does the time to index something like a flawed version of an application, the time to index that compare to the number of days we're seeing in the
Yeah, not even just
here.
index the flawed version. It already indexed the flawed version, so it's negative time, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, we already know about that. Now we know about a vulnerability on that, and now that vulnerability takes 200 days to fix, right? That's 200 days, again, 200 days since they were notified of that problem, not 200 days since the problem existed. That's an important distinction, right? And then the next slide's even scarier if we want to do that. So my job's to scare you. And so, yeah, so that's the vulnerabilities that ever get fixed. Time from when White Hat told them about it to the time that the vulnerability went away. That's if they ever get fixed. This is percentage of vulnerabilities total that are reported that even get fixed. It's kind of like a reverse heat map here. Blue is good, red's bad. So yeah, we see tons of vulnerabilities that just sit there for wherever, right? So I say blue is good, right? that's a relative term to the orange, because you might read this as, I can't read it, it's kind of blurry, but by memory, I think that it's somewhere around 79-80% of cross-site scripting vulnerabilities are fixed at some point. You could also read that as 20% of them are just always open forever, right? If you want to be the pessimist, and you got to be a pessimist if you're in this industry, right? And just kind of expect the worst is going to happen, and they're going to find one of those 20% of the cross-site scripting vulnerabilities and use that one, right? So.
Yeah. So we can see there's sort of more and more pressure right at the time when you're trying to launch an app and you're developing continuously and launching code more and more often. There's more and more pressure to get things fixed because flaws are found more quickly, and individual instances of the flaws can be located with incredible precision. So in this environment, this continuous development environment, are there advantages for security? Are there things that security can learn from continuous development? James, do you want to?
Yeah, my good friend Nick Galbraith, who I work with as well, he likes to say that one of his security features is the speed at which you can deploy. So like being able to remediate quicker, like some of those problems, some of those day counts that Matt shared, they're not a function of like the difficulty, to do it. It's the prioritization and workflow it takes like to actually deploy, code change. And resources inside your system. So if you're like using a old school SDLC water flow approach that you deploy every 3 months or 6 months or something like that, like those timelines are what you get, right? But if you're able to do a fast, rapid iteration, agile style deploy process, it's like we got the report, we rigged up a fix in an hour or two, and we're able to deploy that out to our entire code base pretty quickly.
Yeah,
so that is a feature, like just to be able to remediate quickly. I know that's not like that's not a protection, but it is
Right.
it is that.
No, it sounds great, but Matt, how do you get yourself in a position to be able to do that?
Well, and I want to chime in and kind of second
Sure.
what James said. When I was at Rackspace, there was a particular group, the cloud monitoring group, that was very progressive, 75 deploys a week, kind of a group. And we were testing them one time, and one of our guys found an issue. They're on IRC with the team. The team was in California. We were in San Antonio. He's on IRC. He's like, hey, dude, I found something wrong with so-and-so. Oh, what is it? Here it is. Can you send me an example? Yeah, here's an example. Okay, cool, thanks. Oh, whatever. He goes back, keeps testing. Ding on IRC. Yeah, what's up? It's fixed. What? I deployed it in production. What? So we literally opened and closed the bug because it got fixed before we even could write up the issue. So I think the speed of deploy is a huge benefit to security.
I'm going to just counter the whole language that we use here with continuous deployment, and this is the language that everyone's been using about it is, if you want to be one of those, kind of hip new companies that deploys 10 times a day, we can kind of work on that. I think it's actually becoming a necessity, right? When it comes to security, attackers aren't using waterfall development for exploit kits, right? There's not a group of attackers sitting in a room somewhere saying, I really wish we could get this bug into our exploit kit, but we got to wait for the next release cycle, right? Before we can steal your data. It's not happening, right? And they can scan the internet within seconds and find a problem, or they already found that you're using something that's vulnerable, right? You absolutely need to be able to get these fixes out, also within minutes, right? Preferably minutes, right? However long it takes your build to happen is how long it should take to get the security fix out the door.
So, yeah. And Matt, you mentioned earlier that you could address the sort of different levels of security, the sort of like, bargain basement level right up to the kind of like more deluxe model for getting the fixes out.
I like that. Yeah. So, I mean, how many people here, I already heard the one question earlier, how many people here work for like startups or small Austin companies with very little budget? Are you guys team of sub 2?
2, yeah.
3, 2, 1. Yeah, so I'm 1. I know how that feels now, right? And so, so that's I've really got kind of no budget. I've kind of got no help, right? In terms of like, where do I go here? I've got a little bit, right? I've got myself. I've got my time. What do I do, right? We've talked a lot about open source tools that could help. A lot of them get really noisy to run and kind of hone down. That's why there are these deluxe models, right? So you kind of have to do the balance of how much is my time worth, how much is my developer's time worth versus, what are my risks here, right? And so to really start, I think it really comes down to, and I think everyone that is up on a panel today will agree, and you heard it in the last panel, is, figuring out your landscape, right? What is your threats? What is most important for your organization, right? If you're using a pretty modern web framework that has a lot of protections built in, it's going to take some, jumping through a lot of hoops to code up something like SQL injection or cross-site scripting, because modern frameworks have, hey, the docs say write it this way, and that way is not vulnerable, right? Compared to like a PHP, where if you just write it the easy way, it's vulnerable, right? You have to go out of your way to use something. So if you're an organization that's young and using modern web frameworks, maybe application security isn't where you start. If you can kind of talk to your developers and say, hey, don't do this, this, and this. Okay, cool, right? Maybe now let's start on infrastructure security, and you just really need to like learn how to focus your time and utilize free open source tools to speed that kind of stuff up.
Well, I'd say just pick something and start.
Yeah.
And iterate. Like pick even you might even pick risk-based the wrong thing, and that's okay because you're moving forward, right? And if you look at like the idea of content and continuous deployment improvement, and the continuous improvement kata, you have a goal that you want to achieve, right? I want to have a more robust, solid application. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to start with iteration 1, and I'm going to try this, and I'm going to see how it works. And if it doesn't work, great. I'll pivot a little bit and move on, and I'll pivot a little bit and move on. You might not have this pretty straight path from bad to good. It might kind of look like this, and that's okay because you're still moving in the right direction. And I know at Rackspace, that was very much like a whole bunch of little startups wrapped up. I was in the product security groups. We had a lot of products either being developed or actively developed. And then at Pearson, we're kind of the polar opposite, quite honestly, of a startup. We're a huge 40K company on every continent except for Antarctica. But even in both of those companies, I just picked something and started. I picked a thing and started working on it. That diagram we have up there was on day 3 at Pearson when I got hired. I sat down and said, what are the things we're going to have to do as an AppSec team? Here they are. How can I do this? And more importantly, I'm going to have fewer people than I need, which is a given. What are the things that I can automate and sort of plan out and make routine so I don't have to spend my human brain capital on those stupid routine things? And this is kind of the final product that we have right now in production for the AppSec group of what we're doing to actually move this stuff along and be quick. And we've had crazy gains. We had 44 assessments done by our team. Our team, by the way, was, it started out as 5 senior people. It's down to 4 now. And we have 8 either middling or junior people. Last year they did 43 assessments. This year we're on track to do 200. And it started by us just doing little things and shaving off, getting rid of the paper cuts and shaving off rough edges over and over and over throughout the course of a year. And the other thing I did that I think was really critical if you have the more than one person team is myself and another senior person literally went meta for 3 months. I did no testing whatsoever. I wrote tools that helped the people who did test faster. That's all I did, was just go meta and write tools. And that, I think, is a significant increase. And then the biggest thing, too, is to look at the things that you can, for me, that besides iteration, I have a super high bias for accurate tests. Like, the worst thing you can do is burn developer time, having them figure out what you told them is wrong. Like, a false positive is just plain evil, in my mind. And your value add as a person isn't very much if you're passing down false positives to dev teams.
Right,
so don't burn their time on that.
Right.
Make sure the tests that you have are highly accurate, because those are the things you can automate. If you're comfortable and you're confident that it's going to come back true every time, I can automate that. I can break builds on that.
Yeah, so that's sort of hard, right? Because I had someone tell me in preparing for these conferences, if you're the info security director, the first time you send an engineer a 50-page security report, they will never read your emails again. You are dead.
Yes.
And so how do you get to this point? And that sounds great, Matt. You know that every time it's a true positive, but how do you get to that point?
I think one of the key things we did both at RAC and at Pearson is we don't write reports unless we're guns put to our head, quite honestly. I put them into bug trackers, and I find out how the team handles functional issues, and I have security issues going the same way. They're just tagged security instead of functional. And then it's just a normal process of handling bugs, because let's be honest, software has bugs. Some of them are functional, some of them are security, and it's okay. But if you can put them in the normal flow of work for your dev teams, you're not derailing them and sort of having them do this weird process. I mean, it's funny, you talk about DevOps, right? And the whole DevOps thing was like, the developers would chuck code over the wall and the poor ops people would have to deal with it. Well, look at security. Like, what has security done for years? We've done these giant PDFs that we've chucked over the wall to dev or ops teams and said, deal with it, right? That is a very non-functional model. And I think if you really want to do security right, you have to figure out how your dev teams work. and then make your work match that.
I think that's a key point, and we're going to talk about Gauntlet here in a few seconds, I'm sure. And Gauntlet is an open source tool that helps you do this. But just to kind of piggyback on this specific point is, using security tools that can speak developer, right? Like, can I use something that kind of looks like unit testing? Because developers know how to write unit tests, right? They have no idea what, some cross-site script, what Zap proxy is, that or what Nmap is sometimes, right? But they know, hey, if I write this unit test and it fails, and the security guy told me that if that fails, that it's bad, that makes sense, and let's break the build and things like that, right? And this comes from, it's a crazy cultural shift. To go back to you guys have ordered the panels perfectly, right? It really comes back to culture. I led a conversation at Black Hat of security and continuous integration, and we had this whole long discussion about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now. And this one guy in the room, at some point, we were kind of round tabling, and the guy goes, yeah, but you got to really, you got to have change control, and you really got to, if you're writing your code, you got to get in the room and see what's changing, and we got to do a risk model before we go out the door. After half an hour of continuous integration discussion, and again, I love the Etsy guys, and they were in the room again. They follow me around. They were in the room, and one of the Etsy op guys says, the funny thing about vulnerabilities is that they existed before continuous integration. Still, you did your continuous, you did your change management, and you've been doing that for years, and somehow there's still vulnerabilities ending up in the applications. So if we can talk developer and fix them faster, how does that not all benefit, right?
So some people have said that continuous integration is actually the answer to a lot of security problems that have been around for a long time. So before we move on and talk about these, practical tips for, automating your testing and getting the right information to the right people, James, I just wondered, do you have anything else to add about sort of the pitfalls, the things that can go wrong in this process?
Yeah, I mean, I like that you guys have already brought up DevOps, and I think that's really important because when you take a look at where security is, just from like a high-level view, and as an industry, where is it sitting right now? Like it's sitting and looking very similar to ops was maybe 6-7 years ago. And at that point, there was kind of a revolution of like, hey, we should like codify our infrastructure, and we should like not have kind of these weird ratios of like 10 developers to one operations person. Like, and we should, actually see our software as a service product like uptime and reliability and performance and all that stuff is like part of like everybody's concerns, not just this thing. And there was conferences, early like mid 2000s, like Velocity, which said, hey, let's take all these like front end engineers that are doing JavaScript, and we'll take all the back end operations folks, like sysadmins, and we're gonna like jam them together in a conference. And like at first it was like the weirdest conference in the world because it's like we don't know how to talk this other track, and like people just sort of like didn't align, right? But why was that important? It's because they rallied around the whole desire of performance, right? Everybody knew if you keep a sub 2-second page load time, like your the amount of dollars people spend or how much engagement you have on your website just goes up a lot, and there's a lot of research on that. So they started aligning key people. I think we're at a similar phase in security, and so I believe that we can look at how DevOps transformed operations and kind of the work that operations folks did, and we can see how does security fit in that same model. And some of the things that I think are kind of helpful or like guiding statements for us. If you look at how the DevOps people, they come up with this anagram. It's CAMS. It's John Willis and Damon Edwards came up with this, but it's culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. And if you start mapping like security to all those things, like security generally has a toxic culture. A lot of things aren't very automated, like with the PDF thing. Measurement, a lot of people don't really know, like, are you under attack? What libraries are you using in your code? Where are things coming from? It's like basically you have no insight or visualization or ability. And sharing, like security people, don't generally like to share kind of the problems, and they like to sometimes keep the vulnerabilities, in-house and not inside of all the other systems proliferated. Now, it's not like security people are evil. It's just that we've sort of designed a structure like where that system doesn't work out right, and we have like 100 developers to 10 operations to like one security person in an organization who often has to like deal with compliance, and that's really their real job. And so the organization has sort of like abdicated responsibility for security and hasn't said that like we really want to do this properly. So I just wanted to say that because I think that I want us to like remember like we're at a transition point in the industry, a really exciting time, and we have some prior art of another group that's of a similar standpoint that has like overcome a lot of these same challenges, and we have an opportunity to do that if we can make an impact.
Yeah, so there are a lot of challenges around the techniques of testing, like making the communications more efficient, more streamlined, getting the right information to the right people, and automating some of the testing that we're going to really focus on. But Matt spoke a little bit to this, and our first panel in discussing threat modeling spoke to this, and I'm sure it's a question on everyone's mind. If you want to get started tonight doing some testing, how do you decide what to test for? Like, where do you start? I know you have to start somewhere, and you have to continuously shift what you're testing for. You have a continuous sort of feedback loop, but where do you start? Do you start, I don't know, James, do you want to take a stab at that one? Do you start with the OWASP top 10, or where do you?
Yeah, well, I think I like what Matt Jay was saying earlier. Sometimes you got to analyze where you're at, and I think that's key. You need to look at as security, like how do you provide values both to the dev side and like what you're building into your code base, and then like operationally, like how is it actually being used, where are people going, what are they doing, how are they attacking you, like that gives you actually a visualization into that full picture. So it's almost like not even what you look for first, but I'll let you guys chime in on that. But how do you instrument those pieces?
Matt Jay recently stepped into this role at a startup where he had to decide where do I start.
So where I started and where I talked to a lot of friends that do this, build security programs from relatively ground up, at relatively young organizations. I was like, okay, where did you guys start? And kind of the line that I drew amongst a lot of my peers is monitoring, right? If you have no idea what's going on, then you're just taking stabs in the dark of, the OWASP top 10. I'll start there because, Josh said it 9 times on a presentation, so it sounds really important, so I'm going to start there, right? Whereas, watch out for OWASP number 11. That's the one that'll get you, right? So, just monitoring. Elasticsearch is free. If you guys are not familiar with Elasticsearch, the ELK stack is really popular these days. Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana to visualize this stuff. One of my things in my dev teams, and we lean really heavily on containerization and using Docker and in Google's cloud environment, and we're doing all sorts of fancy stuff like that doesn't really have a lot of security documentation and paperwork on it. So me saying, hey, I'd like to implement some infrastructure security. What does that look like for a whole bunch of Docker containers and microservices and all this kind of stuff, right? It looks completely different than anything that I can't go buy a book on this, is what I'm getting at, right? And so what I've been doing is just don't let a single log die, right? Any log from anything, don't let it die. Just don't, just save all of it, right? Storage is cheap and logs are small, hopefully, right? And so we just we just store everything, and I can look at this data and say, all right, we're not really getting scanned, left and right on these applications, but our brochureware is getting scanned, so let's put some monitoring on that, right? Or, our developers aren't really using traditional tools to kind of hop in and out of boxes and write their code that way. They're not using really traditional deploy models, so let's monitor certain infrastructure level stuff, but in reality, I want to know what's going on at the container level and have some of that data. And you take all that data, you take a look at it as a security person, you know which direction to start walking in, first of all, but you also, and more importantly, is you can communicate this to your development team and you can communicate this to your management team with hard data, right? Hey, we saw this on our logs that, this thing just went across the wire on clear text, and we didn't realize that because we thought we were encrypting that. Or, we saw some scans coming from Russia, and we don't have a single user in Russia. Maybe we can kind of just shut that down for right now, right? And you can kind of make these decisions on real data instead of just taking stabs at lists that people put on the internet.
Well, the other thing, too, that I think is really critical is, for me, right prior to leaving Rackspace, I was working with the container as a service product that just launched, so Rahu for those people. It's really cool. But I was there when they were originally developing that whole container as a service product, and one of the things I did as a security person on this team, besides being with the dev team and working with them, was they were doing continuous deploy and builds, and I wrote a Jenkins job that would just simply, every time they did a check-in of new container building code, I would take that code, build a container, drop some code on it that did some very rudimentary checks. Are the syscalls there? Are the C groups correct? These fundamental things that need to be in place in a container, right? Mm-hmm. And then if they're there, great, we go green. If they're not, we go red. Now, was that an absolute perfect, rugged, completely, unbreakable security test? No, but I knew what? All those containers that got through that build were high enough to ride the ride. And I think a lot of times we do ourselves a disservice by trying to get the perfect and we forego the good enough. And like figuring out what your fundamental things are and automating that, at least I knew every time we built a container and there was a new check-in, there were these N number of fundamental things that were in place.
So
and
that-
when they
so
weren't,
yeah.
it went red.
So, and now we have to see the cute little picture of the Jenkins icon. So to have that discussion. So that's really important. So you can do certain things like harness existing free resources, like your own logs, to sort of see what's most likely happening to you. But you can also use things like Jenkins to customize a way to check that your own defenses are in place. So you intend to defend against certain things in certain ways. You've made decisions, and you're going to put in place automated, and give us an example of how you might do that,
Well,
like that's common to a startup.
I think the biggest thing too is that where the real win is that I didn't have to know there was a problem with the container group until that thing went red. And then it emailed me. Otherwise, I just went about my business because we were resource constrained. So the more testing you can set up in a way that does these low false positives or really no false positives type of tests that only alert you when you need to be alerted, everybody wins. Like that thing ran, I don't know how many times before it went red one time because somebody made a mistake in their Ansible and blah, 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 and we forgot a syscontrol, and fine, we found it. Quick talk conversation with the dev team. And the thing that surprised me is when I left Rack and I told the container team, hey guys, I'm moving on to my next something, they actually hated to see me go. Like, who hates? What development team hates to see the security guy go? They're usually like, woo, this guy's out of here. Like, peace out, yay.
Yeah,
right?
you're right,
I mean,
you're
that
right.
was so fantastic. And it was driven because I kind of let go of the desire to have this perfect security, which I think is a big thing, and just said, what does this team need? And what are the fundamental things that really, really, really have to be in place? And get a short list and check those. And for the containers team, that's what it was.
And I think the most important thing you just said there is making alerts only happen when they need to happen.
Yes.
Because the easiest way to get ignored as a security person in the room is by coming with the 50-page doc, or let's create a Slack room for security alerts, and it's just scrolling. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Possible attack,
that's
possible attack,
that's
possible
the room
attack.
that no one opens, right?
Yeah.
Or that's the email box that I immediately create a rule that says straight to trash, right? I don't want to see anything like that ever again. Thank you, right? So I think that's actually extremely important. There's all sorts of alerting tools that you can use, free open source ones that you can build on top of stuff. There's one that Yelp security team put out called Elast Alert. It's really good, builds on top of Elasticsearch. You can customize your alerts, say, hey, if I see a spike I know that a failed login on my website results in a 403 or whatever, 500 or whatever you want to throw. Hopefully not a 500.
Yeah, not a 500.
But anyway, so hopefully, okay, a failed login throws whatever HTTP response code. Hey, alert me when I get more than 100 of those in a minute. Okay, I'm undergoing a brute force attack, and people need to be alerted to do something about it, right? That's not an alert that's ever going to be ignored. Hey, we just got 100 404s, for a startup at least. I mean, I don't know. Some of these big companies, 100 might not mean much of anything.
And
But you can
appropriate number of zeros.
you can customize where your threshold is, right? For me, 100 would be like, what the heck just happened, right? So, and you could say, okay, what's going on here? And you could do that for all sorts of things, not just brute force attacks. You can,
Yeah, these are great examples of some of the low-hanging fruit. So if you're looking for things that you clearly should be doing, these are great examples. Are there others that people should always be?
Should we start talking about Gauntlet?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
James and I have like a
Let's-
2.5 hour talk that we do on Gauntlet, so
Yeah.
I've been trying to.
Yeah, sure. So, what is Gauntlet? I don't know. I think we have a slide on that.
It's up right now, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Next
So
one.
I think there's another slide. Okay, yeah. So this is what a Gauntlet attack looks like. So if you're familiar with Cucumber, it looks very similar to that. It's basically just plain English that developers and operations and security people can all read and not have to really guess about what's going on. Let's just kind of read through it. It has a kind of a structure of when I lean in, it's very okay. Given, when, then. So each scenario runs independently of each other, but there's the given steps, which are some background setup. There's when. Okay, great, thank you.
We're saving your neck.
It's like my chiropractor thanks you. The win step there is an nmap attack. So if you're familiar with nmap, or if you're not familiar with it, it's a network scanning tool. But this is a very like operations type.
And just to stop there, because I think we're hearing, we heard about Shodan and how attackers can use it. Attackers can use nmap too, right? So if you're not using it, you probably should.
Yeah. I guess Gauntlet's big. Like what we're trying to do with Gauntlet is take all these attack tools that everybody would point at your website that are just publicly and freely available, and then harness those and put them inside your build pipeline. And so, because a lot of these attack tools spit out weird types of output, sometimes they take really long to run. They're sometimes can be unpredictable. Gauntlet sort of helps put a wrapper around all those, and you can say, oh, this is the desired outcome that I want from like when the scanner runs. Like it shouldn't find any cross-site scripting or SQL injection, or in this case, like open services or open ports on your box. So this is a network one, but we have, like Matt mentioned, there's on GitHub, there's a Gauntlet -dim. There's the Gauntlet account, and it's no E in there. That was taken. But if you go to Gauntlet and then /Gauntlet demo, which is the repo for the organization, there's a bunch of example code and test code that we've done at South by for the last couple of years. So,
and yeah, this is we're speaking developer, to come back to that, right? Like this is what they're used to this. Developers can look at this and say, oh, I write those, right? I know how to write that, and say, okay, I'm building a new form that's going to do something. Okay, well, the security guy said that when I build a new form, I need to include this Gauntlet test, and that's it. Like, they don't need to write it. They just say, hey, include this one, and that one could be, hey, we're going to check for cross-site scripting in this form real quick. Or I know this form talks to the database, so I'm going to run a very, very short SQL map test on this parameter, right? That just says, really quickly, I did that right, or I'm going to check that if I send this request of this form without the CSRF token, that it fails. Or these little incremental tests per form, so if they fail when you push your code through the build, you know exactly where they failed, what line of code it was, who pushed the code, so you can go smack and the commit, everything about it, and then you can easily roll that back or easily roll out a fix, or it never goes out the door for certain issues. Hey, for cross-site scripting, don't let the code go out the door, right? But hey, maybe we leaked an IP address, I think. Like maybe let that go out the door, but alert the security guy, right? And say, hey, get that private IP address off our website, right? Those kinds of things. And you can kind of tailor that all for your organization.
Well, and I like the fact about Gauntlet is that you can be iterative about it, right? You can slowly build up this sort of, cadre of tests over time.
Yeah.
And because I don't know about anybody here, but I never have enough time to do exactly what I want to do. Mm-hmm. So if I can find a way to time slice that guy up into a lot of little pieces, it's a great thing. And so the ability to sort of over time, as you think about it and realize or find issues, to add these little tests to some kind of framework like Gauntlet, you're really far ahead of it.
And that's also important for something like reopen rate. I have another slide with all sorts of cool numbers on it of vulnerabilities that get reopened, right? So there's a certain percent that even after they get fixed, they rear their head again at some point, right? And usually they're the most critical of the vulnerabilities wind up popping up again. And my little theory about that is that the most critical vulnerabilities usually wind up getting a hot fix outside of the development lifecycle, and all of a sudden the development lifecycle comes on through and writes back over the hot fix, right? Is my theory on why that is the reopen rate is higher. But if every time you find a vulnerability in your website, it's part of your process that says, let's make a Gauntlet test that finds that vulnerability and make sure that we never push code again if that vulnerability is ever found, and it won't reopen.
James, can you talk a little bit more about how you can adapt Gauntlet to your organization and sort of like hit the right notes so that you're not overwhelming your organization? And
yeah, right. We're based on Cucumber, and if you're familiar with Cucumber, you can sort of have like explosive step definitions and kind of have people writing a lot of different things. For Gauntlet, we ship the like canned step definitions. We hook. It's a Ruby tool, but you don't have to run Ruby other than like the execution. So like it has like hooks to Python apps or Python scripts and Python applications and other types of. And we also have a generic like command line type wrapper. So one of the keys is Gauntlet sort of has a safety hook there where we don't let you bring your own steps in there. So you're kind of forced to kind of use the structure that we already provide. And I think it's really helpful to take your first approach is, all right, I'm not going to even break the build, even if we find cross-site scripting or whatever. It's like, I'm just going to take Gauntlet. I'm going to have Jenkins kick it off as a secondary type build, make sure it like reports somewhere in wherever everybody can see it in HipChat or Slack or whatever you use. And start iterating slowly, right? Just like put a couple of these attacks in there. The other problem with that people have when they're trying to like harness attack tooling and they're trying to put inside their build pipeline is that attack tooling can sometimes take a really long time to run. So you can just pick up like a web app scanner, click go, and come back like 3 hours later, and it's like still going. Come back tomorrow, it's like your terminal's crashed, and you're like, oh sweet, that was pleasant. So that's the part of we find ourselves in that the organizations or a lot of large organizations where we're really constrained on the security resource. You have like 100 developers to one security person. It's like not a scalable thing. So what we're hoping with Gauntlet is you can federate kind of that knowledge. So in this instance on line right below the win statement, it says nmap -f, right? So the -f is the security magic, right? And but it's not really magic, but like there's for like a web app scanner, you can sort of craft a statement that has like maybe 6 or 7 switches on it, has like login, has like a bunch of tagging related to it, and how you've set up your site, like what pages and paths to avoid. And so that's knowledge. It's kind of like security people know that, people that have run the tool that know that, they're really familiar with it, but it's not federated down to the rest of the organization. It's not available to anybody else. So that's sort of the locking of that statement.
So as the security person within your organization, you're taking full advantage of these tools and you're using them to kind of break things down and make them manageable and get usable results. But what is the interaction of the engineer with these tools? How do you communicate the results, what you get from these tools? I don't know, Matt, if
That's
this
a
is something
million-dollar
on your
question.
mind.
Yeah, that's a million-dollar question, right? So I think it's really important. So we've kind of talked about alerting a lot. I think it's really important to put these alerts, like we've harped on every time, only alert when it's that it's serious, because otherwise people will ignore it after like 2. Put these alerts somewhere that everyone's eyes already are, right? If you put it in a Jira thing that's just for that, and someone's eyes aren't already there, it's kind of easy to ignore. But if you guys use Slack or HipChat, if you put it in the channel that the developers that are in charge of that say you found something for the web app, you put it in the web apps team's channel, and you only alert like when it's something that they need to see. Okay, put it there, and put details like, hey, commit string this from GitHub with a link to GitHub. You wrote this code on this line. We found this problem, and they'll know exactly what we're talking about.
How long is that report that you're talking about?
Don't say the report. Don't say report.
Don't say report. How long is that perfectly crafted haiku of a security message?
Really?
Well, I guess then I ansred my own question.
Yeah,
we all know how.
575.
Yeah,
I think Gauntlet's new feature is going to have haiku output. I'm going to work on that.
It should be tweetable. It should be tweetable.
Yeah, and who does that go to? Does that go to the person who actually wrote it, so they're accountable for it and they're the owner of that?
So Twitter used to run a project, I don't know if it's still around, called SadB.
Yeah,
you guys know
SadB
is
still
still around? Yeah, okay. So SadB, the Twitter engineering team uses it, and all of these alerting tools feed into SadB, and then SadB kind of names and shames the developer that it was part of. So yeah, the whole team sees it, but the person that needs to be responsible is highlighted or however you want to do it. But I think what you're getting at is it's got to be bite-sized. It's got to say, this is the problem, this is why it's a problem, and here is the problem. And if you want bonus points, here's how to fix the problem, right? Hey, you coded some SQL injection. If you put some question marks over here, and that's a parameterized query, and then it's done, right? And okay, cool. Like, I know how to do that, right? So you got to speak developer. Like, how many times do I got to say that?
Yeah. One thing we did at Pearson is we wrote a little chat bot that sits on our HipChat channel. Like I said, we're on every continent except for Antarctica. And I like to sleep, and so do the other security team members. So whenever their time zone appropriate sleep time is, they're probably sleeping. But I wanted to be able to get developers' feedback at least quickly. So you can ask our AppSec bot for advice. Like, you can go into our channel and say AppSec bot advice on XSS, and here's a short little blurb. This is what XSS is. Here's a little blurb about how to fix it, and then here's some links to our internal resources on how to do it. Now, this is like total 24/7 self-serve, right? It's fantastic. Now, if they need more help, sure, I'll gladly talk to them when I'm actually awake. But like this provides a way for people like to get this like quick and instant, easy feedback in a way that they're used to. That I think is really valuable.
I think the chat ops. I didn't even think of that. I actually helped write a.
You know what you're doing later today.
No, actually, I've already done it. I didn't think to say it. We have a chat bot that I sit in a room with a bunch of forensics geeks, and we have a little Hubot instance. If you guys are familiar with Hubot, and we wrote some scripts to go do some lookups on things like VirusTotal or whatever. Hey, I saw this IP address popping up in my logs, and it looks kind of fishy. I can go do a lookup in my Slack channel that says, is this IP address on some known, bad person list somewhere, right? And it's just right there in your chat room, and you sit there all the time anyway. And like you said, it's 24/7, and you don't have to load up some web page that you forgot where the URL was.
We did the same thing for our internal chat that isn't in our public chat, our AppSec group chat, for what the state of an app is in terms of vulnerability counts, because inevitably you get pinged, hey, what's going on with my app? When was the last time you tested it? So we have the bot. I can just ask the bot, hey, what's the status on app X? It'll give me back, these are the highs, mediums, lows. Last time tested was this. I get like metadata, and I can answer that email by literally copying and pasting out of the chat and going done, right? Move on.
Yeah. So with this tool, with Gauntlet, so you've decided, okay, I'm going to try to use this to test and identify some vulnerabilities, and you can easily customize it to what you want to test for. So to use the example from the first panel, if you said, I want to test for cross-site scripting, I see that was on, one of the top vulnerabilities that often doesn't get fixed for a long time. Can you do that with?
Yeah. And inside of that Gauntlet demo repo that I mentioned, we have examples for cross-site scripting, SQL injection, directory fuzzing, invalid login attempts. There's like, if you're not meeting like the Mozilla default security policy, we alert off that. There's like 10 or 15 example attacks that you could just copy paste and you're ready to go.
SSL, you could test your SSL.
That's right. Yeah, the SSL certs. I was trying to remember what. And I think it's important too. Some of these tests you do need to actually run them for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or take like a longer runtime. You still want to not. But so you kind of end up parsing up some of your security tests to, well, these I want to run on every commit, and these one maybe I want to run nightly or something. And on every commit, like that's a lot better because you can really tie like what changed to the thing that broke. But even daily is like often pretty helpful for people.
Still in the 1%.
Yeah, you're still in the 1%er in that.
Well, the biggest thing is you're reducing the scope of where that problem lies to a reasonable number, a reasonable amount, as opposed to our 6 months of coding.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
And how does Gauntlet fit in with other things that we've been hearing about, like ZAP, like OWASP, Zed Attack Proxy, and other things? Would you use both, and how do you fit?
Yeah, so Gauntlet is to kind of build into the pipeline, right? It's meant to be run by not security people, right? It's meant to kind of be used in plain English. And you saw the tests, right? It's just given this tool's installed. If it runs and has some bad output, like fail. It's pretty. You don't need to know how to code to write a Gauntlet test. Things like Zap, Attack Proxy. There's all sorts of other tools that you can pay lots of money for. If you have that kind of money, those are usually meant to be run by security people who can actually point them in the right direction, hit fire, and actually digest their results in some sort of meaningful way. Whether that's weed through false positives or actually just understand the output that's going on. A lot of these tools are not meant to just be part of your build pipeline daily commit. Every commit kind of thing.
Too noisy.
Far too noisy, right? If anyone's ever tried to run a commercial static code analysis tool without any sort of vetted results, noisy doesn't begin to quite describe what most of those are like. And so to run them on every commit is the easiest way for you, the security person, to get laughed out of the developer. Stand up. Oh yeah, you're not invited anymore. We're not running, Fortify every time we commit or whatever it is, right? So sorry to name and shame. But.
Well, and I think one of the key things there is that, and this is kind of James said the same thing, is you don't necessarily have to quote unquote break the build. And what we've done in a lot of cases at Pearson is whatever tool we're running, we'll run it 2, 3, 4 times, kind of babysitting it and finding out where the sweet points are. And these are the checks that are always false positive. These are the checks that are wonky enough that they sometimes are right, sometimes they're wrong. But guess what? I'm going to take them out because I can't rely on them. And we've really kind of focused on writing a profile. Almost all of these scanners have sort of a profile of tests that you can run. So really getting a good solid profile, and then once I can run that 2 or 3 times and only get actionable results, that's when I start wiring in a gauntlet, breaking builds, sending alerts, because now I've run this thing 2 or 3, 4 times, and I have a good feel for it. Now that takes a little bit of upfront effort, but once you get that there, it's rinse and repeat.
And I mean, let's go back to the proxies. If you want to try to use that in sort of I don't have a security team, it's just me kind of way. If you want to be friends, if you do have a QA team, right? And you could say, hey, QA guys, you're already running maybe some Selenium scripts, or you're already doing some sort of QA automation that says if I click this button, it turns blue, and I want it to turn blue. Cool, right? If you can kind of get in there and make buddies with those people and say, well, also just put this Selenium script in there, right? That's going to do something that Zap attack proxy kind of does also, because I found this issue this one time.
Yeah, there's
right?
the Zapper wrapper.
Yeah.
Zapper
Zapper wrapper?
Zapper
Yeah,
wrapper?
Zapper wrapper.
Didn't think about how that was going to sound when I said it, but yeah, Zapper is a good
Did you just coin a new term, James? He's always.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
It is a thing.
Okay.
going to be thinking about how haiku that
There's no
later.
vowels in it either, so it's very Austin,
It is right. It should have a .io somewhere.
Well, okay, so this panel clearly has a wealth of experience at making security palatable, making it practical, communicating it within an organization, and I want to give an opportunity for folks to ask them questions about some of the tools and techniques we've been discussing. I see, we'll wait for a mic to get to. I see a bunch of questions in the back of the room.
Yeah, hi, my name's Morgan. Can the panel talk a little bit about how you ensure that there's a legal kind of framework for you to do some of these activities internally within your organization? Because I know just running organizations myself that oftentimes like your biggest threat is the people within. So like how do you raise issues? Like if you find something that is a vulnerability, how do you raise that issue in a way that keeps you
Protected.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes down to really internal policy making and adoption from above, right? A lot of you who are security individuals at startups, obviously you got there because you had adoption from above, and they had the foresight enough to say, we got to bring in a security person early, right? So hopefully you won't get as much pushback in that, that type of organization. But it really comes down to, I've got this policy that I'm going to do some testing, and I have the power, the get out of jail free card that says, if I break it, something like if I find a vulnerability, that's what you're actually paying me to do, right? And you can have the documentation that says that, but hopefully that's kind of the agreed upon terms of employment of hiring a security person is, we're about to unleash a bull in a china shop and pay them a lot of money to do that, right? So
the other thing you can do too is like, for me, pushing stuff into Jira backlogs. If you talk with the dev team, the people who are going to be in that backlog is either a project manager or the devs that fix it. So those are people that are going to have to know that anyway. So for me, I kind of honestly sidestepped that problem by putting it directly into their bug trackers because they're already there. And there's already access control the way we have our bug tracker set up that only team members can get into those things. So for me, that was kind of easy. And like for reporting, if you're using, say, box.com, right? You have a box account for file share. Like if it's attached to your SSO and you already have people's credentials in there, I can drop things into like a dev manager's box folder that's shared. And only he can get to it, right? I can't stop him to do something with it afterwards. That's his problem. But at least I get that instantly kind of for free just by writing a little bit against the API of Box. Create a report, God help me when I have to, and drop it in their box and done, right? And then if they get fired, they leave, they transition away, they go out of SSO and they can't get into Box anymore, we're done. So it actually saves me a lot of heartache by leveraging existing systems. Maybe you have a SharePoint or whatever, right? Just drop it into those things that exist that already have that access control built in, and you'll save yourself a ton of trouble. Because I went through the mental exercise of like, God, I got to get this report to business units. Now I'm going to have to keep a list, or I'm going to have to tie into LDAP, or I'm going to have to I'm like, wait a minute, we got Box. I just drop it in their box, and I'm done.
Well, just in the interest of, I think if we're going to have ongoing dialogue on an issue, we should save that for the lunch hour, just in the interest of taking a few more questions. We had a hand that was up from the beginning also back there. Then we'll move to the front of the room.
Hey, this is Patrick. So you talked a lot about Gauntlet and how valuable it is for the daily development cycle, which seems really valuable as far as capturing those low-hanging fruit. And then what would motivate a company to go for these kind of paid tools that are looking at your code? Are they capturing more complex vulnerabilities that something like Gauntlet wouldn't capture? Obviously, so you said they're very noisy and requires a really knowledgeable professional to manage. So what are the advantages of those tools?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to your team, right, and your knowledge base internally. So complexity, sure. As Matt said, we're throwing out a lot of tests in for the sake of accuracy, right? So you are going to want to do more thorough assessments of your own code, whether that's internal team if you have someone knowledgeable enough to do that, or you need to bring in some high-dollar tool or consultant, or both consultant to run some tool or whatever it is, right, to do a more in-depth assessment. A lot of compliance requirements are going to say you have to do that anyway, so there's the advantage there. But then also a lot of these, some of the deluxe tools, really what they're going to bring to the table, depending on your organization, is scale. They're going to, a lot of them are built for bigger organizations to sell to enterprise level things and say, okay, I'm going to be able to test not my 3 applications that I have, and one of them is a WordPress, right? I'm going to be able to test, a couple hundred over different business units, over different continents, including Antarctica or whatever it is, right? And and that's really what you're paying for the privilege to do, right?
Yeah, I think the other thing is, like anything, it's the ability, you can't next run these tools, right? And so if you don't want to next run a tool, you need somebody who understands what it's really doing. So it's somebody who doesn't have a security background is much more likely to click next 5 times, drop in a URL, and then get less than stellar results. So the ability, it's like turning on, like the first time I turned on Snort on when I was a sysadmin, good God, that thing alerted on everything, and I just turned it off. Forget it, I'm done. Like one thing, that's just not my bailiwick. It's not an exciting thing for me. But 2, it was just too noisy, and I didn't have enough clue at that time in my career to understand how to tune it. So really, it's like, I think commercial tools can be valuable if you have the people who know how to tune and set up a profile that's accurate. That's really where it comes down to. Otherwise, you're just generating noise at a quicker speed, which is not very cool.
Good response. And we have another question down front in the red shirt here, please. If you could get a microphone right here to this 3rd row.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Milos, and I'm software engineer for a UK-based startup. And I've got this responsibility to kind of set up some security for our product. It's a mobile app. So, and I don't have a lot of experience, and we're in a phase where we can't really afford to hire someone. So my question is, basically, we have the API, which is the main core of the app. And what is like pros and cons between using JSON web tokens and OAuth 2 as a system of security?
Oh, interesting.
I'll let Wickett take it. He's the developer.
Oh, I was going to say, Matt J should answer this question.
Darn it. That's a really specific question. Okay, so it really depends on your use case, right? So like what you're using. I know we use both for we'll use a JWT for certain authentication, and then we'll use OAuth for completely different means of communication to third-party type tools. The really important part, the part that the security guy cares about, is that everything's encrypted along the way. These tokens are fairly well hardened now, because they've had a lot of eyes on them, over the past few years. OAuth has had its share of problems. But, as long as the SSL certificate is up to my standards, and thanks Apple for the new iOS 9 standards. I don't know if your API is any mobile presence, but iOS 9, you have to use some really, really high-level, transport layer security. What are they calling it? Do you guys have any idea what I'm talking about? I can't remember what acronym they called it, but it's pretty high level stuff. And so, okay, if you're encrypting the transmission of that token to the other side in the proper way, if there's some kind of pass through and you're doing, hey, OAuth token to this proxy, decrypt, use it, re-encrypt, send somewhere else, make sure that both sides are good. That's kind of where I've run into it. So. Not really pros and cons, in my opinion, of either in terms of specific for security for the token itself, but how you use it.
And a lot of it's just understanding what you're buying or not buying with that choice. And like, you can be, I love when people are like, oh, you can't write a secure app in language X, but you can in language Y. Like, you could be stupid in any programming language. Let's be honest. You really can. There are no guardrails. So it's more about understanding what you get from that, your choice, and understanding the spec, to be really honest with you, because you can make choices where you think you're getting A but you get B, and then all of a sudden you're doomed, and it didn't matter if you implemented it correctly or not, right? So I would say really understand the spec and understand the use case that those specs are written for, And if it matches your use case, then you're good.
So unfortunately, I think that was the last question that we have time for, but I'm going to, because I'm a very mean moderator, I'm going to encourage you all to come and trap our panelists here for discussion because we now have our lunch break, and we're going to have about 50 minutes for lunch, and then we're going to have a really unique opportunity. There's going to be a fireside chat. I cannot promise you an actual fire. There should not be one in this room, I'm told. But a fireside chat with one of the founders of Live Oak Venture Partners and Commissioner McSweeney, talking about the importance of investing in security, where we mean actual literal investments that I'm sure all startups are interested in. And then we'll have a couple afternoon panels. So we have 50 minutes for lunch now, lunch and panelists trapping. I'd like to
Panelists
now
need food too, so if you bring me food, I'll answer questions much faster.
I think she just doesn't want to buy us lunch.
I'd like to really thank our panelists for sharing their expertise with us.
Thanks.